Chapter 6, Part 1. I will have to speed up Mrs. Witch's voice a little bit to make sure I don't run out of time. The Happy Median. Again, they focused their eyes on the crystal ball. The earth, with its fearful covering of dark shadows, swam out of their view, and they moved rapidly through the Milky Way. And there was the thing again. Watch, the medium told them. The darkness seemed to seethe and writhe. Was this meant to comfort them? Suddenly there was a great burst of light through the darkness, and the light spread out, and where it touched the darkness disappeared. The light spread until the patch of dark thing had vanished, and there was only a gentle shining. And through the shining came the stars, clear and pure. Then slowly the shining dwindled until it too was gone, and there was nothing but stars and starlight. No shadows, no fear, only the stars and the clear darkness of space, quite different from the fearful darkness of the thing. You see, the medium cried, smiling happily, it can be overcome, and it's being overcome all the time. Mrs. Whatsit sighed, a sigh so sad that Meg wanted to put her arms around her and comfort her. Tell us exactly what happened then, please, Charles Wallace said in a small voice. It was a star, Mrs. Whatsit said sadly. A star giving up its life in battle with the thing. It won. Oh, yes, my children, it won. But it lost its life in the winning. Mrs. Witch spoke again. Her voice sounded tired, and they knew that speaking was a tremendous effort for her. It was not so long ago for you, was it? She asked gently. Mrs. Witch shook her head. Charles went up to Mrs. Whatsit. I see. Now I understand. You were a star once, weren't you? Mrs. Whatsit covered her face with her hands as though she was embarrassed and nodded. And you did what that star just did? With her face still covered, Mrs. Whatsit nodded again. Charles Wallace looked at her very solemnly. I should like to kiss you. Mrs. Whatsit took her hands down from her face and pulled Charles Wallace to her in a quick embrace. He put his arms around his neck, pressed her cheek against hers, and then kissed her. Meg felt that she would have liked to have kissed Mrs. Whatsit too, but that after Charles Wallace, anything that she or Calvin did or said would be anticlimax. She contented herself with looking at Mrs. Whatsit, even though she was used to Mrs. Whatsit's odd get-up, and the very oddness of it is what made her seem so comforting. She realized with a fresh shock that it was not Mrs. Whatsit herself that she was seeing at all. The true Mrs. Whatsit, Meg realized, was beyond human understanding. But what she saw was only the game Mrs. Whatsit was playing. It was such an amusing and charming game, a game full of both of laughter and comfort, but it was only the tiniest facet of all the things Mrs. Whatsit could be. I didn't mean to tell you, Mrs. Whatsit faltered. I didn't ever mean ever for you to know, but oh, my dears, I did so love being a star. You are still very young, Mrs. Witch said, her voice faintly chiding. The medium sat happily at the star-filled sky in her ball, smiling and nodding and chuckling gently. But Meg noticed that her eyes were drooping, and suddenly her head fell forward and she gave a faint snore. Poor thing, Mrs. Whatsit said. We've worn her out. It's very hard work for her. Please, Mrs. Whatsit asked, Meg asked, what happens now? Why are we here? What do we do next? Where is father? When are we going to him? She clasped her hands pleadingly. One thing at a time, love, Mrs. Whatsit said. Mrs. Who cut in. As partes ten ouvidos, that's Portuguese, walls have ears. Let us go outside, Mrs. Whatsit said. Come, we'll let us sleep. But as they turned to go, the medium jerked her head up and smiled at them radiantly. You weren't going to go without saying goodbye to me, were you? She asked. We thought we'd just let you sleep, dear. Mrs. Whatsit patted the medium's shoulder. We worked you terribly hard, and we know you must be very tired. But I was going to give you some ambrosia or nectar or at least some tea. And at this, Meg realized that she was hungry. How much time had passed since they had had their bowls of stew? She wondered. Mrs. Whatsit said, Oh, thank you, dear, but I think we'd better be going. They don't need to eat, you know, Charles Wallace whispered to Meg. At least not food, the way we do. Eating's just a game with them. As soon as we go to organized again, I'd better remind them that they'll have to feed us sooner or later. The medium smiled and nodded. It does seem as though I should be able to do something nice for you after having had to show these poor children such horrid things. Would you like to see your mother before you go? Could we see father? Meg asked eagerly. No, Mrs. Witch said. We are going to your father, Meg. Do not be impatient. But we could see her mother, couldn't she? The medium wheedled. Oh, why not? Mrs. Whatsit put in. It won't take long and it can't do any harm. And Calvin, too, Meg asked. Can he see his mother, too? Calvin touched Meg in a quick gesture, and whether it was of thanks or apprehension, she was not sure. I think it is a mistake, Mrs. Witch was disapproving, but since you have mentioned it, I suppose you must go ahead. I hate it when she gets cross, Mrs. Whatsit said, glancing over at Mrs. Witch. And the trouble is, she always seems to be right. But I really don't know how it could hurt, and it might make you all feel better. Go on, medium dear. The medium, smiling and humming softly, turned the crystal ball a little between her hands. Stars, comets, planets flashed across the sky, and then the earth came into view again. The darkened earth, closer, closer, till it filled the globe, and they had somehow gone through the darkness until the soft white of clouds and the genuine outline of continents shone clearly. Calvin's mother first, Meg whispered to the medium. The globe became hazy, cloudy, then shadows began to solidify, to clarify, and they were looking into an untidy kitchen with a sink full of unwashed dishes, and in front of the sink stood an unkempt woman with gray hair stringing about her face. Her mouth was open, and Meg could see the toothless gums, and it seemed like she could almost hear her screaming at two small children who were standing by her. And then she grabbed a long wooden spoon from the sink and began whacking one of the children. Oh dear, the medium murmured, and the picture began to dissolve. I didn't really. It's all right, Calvin said in a low voice. I think I'd rather you knew. But instead of reaching out to Calvin for safety, Meg took his hand in hers, not saying anything in words, but trying to tell him by the pressure of her fingers what she felt. If anyone had told her that only the day before that she, Meg, the snaggle-toothed, the myopic, the clumsy, would be taking a boy's hand to offer him comfort and strength, particularly a popular and important boy like Calvin, the idea would have been beyond her comprehension. But now it seemed as natural to want to help and protect Calvin as it did Charles Wallace. The shadows were swirling in the crystal again, and as they cleared, Meg began to recognize her mother's lab at home. Mrs. Murray was sitting perched on a high stool, writing away on a sheet of paper on a clipboard on her lap. She's writing father, Meg thought, the way she always does, every night. The tears that she could never learn to control swam in her eyes as she watched. Mrs. Murray looked up at her letter almost as though she were looking toward the children, and then her head drooped and she put it down on the paper and sat there, huddled up, letting herself relax into an unhappiness that she never allowed the children to see. And now the desire for tears left Meg, the hot, protective anger she felt for Calvin when she looked into his home, she now felt toward her mother. Let's go, she cried harshly. Let's do something. She's always so right, Mrs. Whatsit murmured, looking towards Mrs. Witch. Sometimes I wish she'd just say, I told you so, and have done with it. I only meant to help, the medium wailed. Oh, medium dear, don't feel badly, Mrs. Whatsit said swiftly. Look at something cheerful, do. I can't bear to have you distressed. It's all right, Meg assured that medium earnestly. Truly it is, Mrs. Medium, and we thank you very much. Are you sure? The medium asked, brightening. Of course, it really helped me ever so much because it made me mad. And when I'm mad, I don't have room to be scared. Well, kiss me goodbye for good luck, then, the medium said. Meg went over to her and gave her a quick kiss, and so did Charles Wallace. The medium looked smilingly at Calvin and winked. I want the young man to kiss me, too. I always did love red hair, and it'll give you good luck, lady me love. Calvin bent down blushing and awkwardly kissed her cheek. The medium tweaked his nose. You've got a lot to learn, my boy, she told him. Now, goodbye, medium dear, and many thanks, Mrs. Whatsit said. I dare say we'll see you in an eon or two. Where are you going in case I want to tune in? The medium asked. Camazotz, Mrs. Whatsit told her. Where and what was Camazotz? Meg did not like the sound of the word or the way in which Mrs. Whatsit pronounced it. But please don't distress yourself on our behalf. You know you don't like looking in on the dark planets, and it's very upsetting to us when you aren't happy. But I must know what happens to the children, the medium said. It's my worst trouble, getting fond. If I didn't get fond, I could be happy all the time. Oh well, ho-hum. I managed to keep pretty jolly, and a little snooze would do wonders for me right now. Goodbye, everybody. And her word got lost in the general buzz of a snore. Come, Mrs. Witch ordered, and they followed her out of the darkness of the cave into the impersonal grayness of the medium's planet. Now, children, you must not be frightened with what is going to happen, Mrs. Witch warned. Stay angry, little Meg, Mrs. Whatsit whispered. You will need all of your anger now.